We good?
Yep.
Okay.
Good.
Sounds good. Awesome. All right. And I'll keep admitting as I talk. So
Okay.
welcome again. Thank you everybody for being here. Sherry is our Director of Finance. This is harder than I thought. I'm clicking and talking at the same time. Anyway, so if I get distracted. But Sherry, our Director of Finance and Administration, has put this together, which we're very excited to help support our families and some of our clients and just people in the community in general. And so we put together a pretty awesome team today to just kind of go over high level of some things that we believe that would help benefit our families. First, we'll have George Arribas. He is with Merrill Lynch. Next, we'll have Lauren Edwards with the Gomez Edwards Law Group. And then we will follow up with Chase Tedson of the Tedson Insurance Group. And he's going to talk about a program called TACT. And they'll each take maybe 8 to 10 minutes in their segments. And then there will be time for a Q&A at the end. I do ask that if you ask any questions, try to make them a very general question. If you want specific questions, each of them will be providing their contact information so that you can reach out to them directly. I believe all of them have offered for a free consultation to discuss your particular situation or their services. So that again will come down the line later. And then lastly, I am going to ask that you stay muted during their presentations. If you forget or walk away, I can mute for you. And then during the QA, and of course, we'll open it up for everybody to unmute themselves. Lastly, we are going to provide the slide deck. They're very high-level general slides that we'll be going through. Those will go to the email addresses that you signed up for if you bought the Eventbrite ticket. If you needed to be sent, if you need them to be sent to a different email address, go ahead and send them to myself privately in the chat if you'd prefer. And I think that's it. So yeah, I just want to welcome first George Arribas. I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Tara. Thanks, Sherry. And thanks for those who are on the call. I greatly appreciate it. Along with Lauren, Chase, and myself. I think for the autism or special needs community in general, it's pretty personal for us. You know, we all have a personal story, and I've been working with Second Start now for about a couple of years now. So I'm glad that you guys were able to put this event together, and thank you for having us. But what I'm going to really talk about is really about planning. And on the first slide, you just see it's like a lifetime of support. This is just to kind of get you thinking, and if you haven't already, to start kind of like planning. And even though if you haven't started, it's never too late to start. The best time to start is really when you're able to start. All right. So what I'll talk about first is little disclaimer, right? Because since investments and stuff, I got to keep this all legal, is that the investments, they can lose value, and they're not FDIC insured, except if it's a bank investment, but they are SIPC insured. All right, so I just keep maybe about a minute or so just to kind of like read through that little disclaimer. I think we kind of get it, right? So I'll go to the next slide. I just want to give you a little bit of the agenda. I'll go a little bit about the special needs planning, my role as a financial advisor for special needs families. And what I've mentioned before is for special needs, it's very personal. I think I've had for like friends for over 30 years that have, special needs children who are now in their teens. So I get to see what they go through. And I've been invited, even with my other families that I work with, I've been invited to sit in IAT meetings or sit when I go to SARC, to attend these types of meetings just to get a better understanding. So in that way I can put the resources together and help families provide, additional support. Then after I speak, Lauren Edwards of Gomez Edwards Law Group, attorney at law, she'll be speaking about special needs trust. And again, it's kind of like a high level overview, but it'll give you kind of like a starting point of which way you want to go. And then with Chase Tedson of the Tedson Agency, he's part of this organization that he supports. It's called TACT. It's Teaching Autism Community Traits. It's a very interesting organization, and for those who are on the call, he has a special gift. And I want him to talk about his organization as well. Then towards the end, we'll open it up for Q&A, and during the Q&A, we'll leave our contact info, as Tara mentioned, on the info in case that you needed to seek additional advice on your situation. There's no cost, so there's no obligation, but at least that Lauren and I and even Chase can check some of your blind spots. And if you're already working with an advisor, if you're working with an attorney, at least you can take that to them and say, hey, you know, this is what is going on. Maybe we can add this piece to it. All right. And then the last slide will be like a resource page. So it'll have like CalABLES on there. And there's other additional special needs sites that I've used and other families that I know that I work with use as well. And I'll be happy to share that. So now just going into the team, this is my team that I work with. Andy's my his partner, along with Lori, myself, and on the far left, that's Andy's daughter. She does all my LinkedIn page, my marketing. She does everything for our website. I think combined experience is probably about 35 years of experience, the team as a whole. And we have, God, I probably have maybe about a dozen or so special needs families that I work with. And so that's probably the most rewarding part of the job, is making sure that I can help these families. So to start, so when it comes to like being a parent of a special needs family, right? Just preparing and having so many different questions on where to start, right? So some of the most pressing questions might be, right, is who will take care of your special needs, child, right? When you're no longer able to, that's one of the questions. Another question could be, is there adequate resources, whether it be government resources or resources that you already have? And on the next slide is what will happen when school ends, or when your child turns 18. So these are probably one of maybe the three top of mind questions that families go through. So hopefully that this webinar with me, Lauren, and Chase will give you some ideas to start planning. Now, it all begins when you're trying to prepare for the future, right? So the fact is that few families, loved ones with special needs families, they don't really have like a financial kind of like a plan or in place, and they don't know really where to start, right? Where they have where they want to start their financial plan. And if you're not prepared, there can be kind of like drastic consequences for not preparing, right? So when you're talking to, a professional, this is when you want to start that conversation with a professional, whether it's attorney, whether it's a financial advisor, it could be a care provider that you want to start with. So what you want to include is also, and I'll kind of like touch on this on the next slide, is involving the entire family. Because if you want to make sure that the entire family, whether it's a trustee or not, or outside trustee, that they're all on the same page, that they're able to provide guidance and care for their special needs family or their special needs member. So the sooner that you begin, to prepare, the sooner you can start to feel kind of like more confident, you're assured about planning for your loved one's future. Now, helping you do the right thing, for your special needs families really is designed to improve the quality of life for your family overall. And that's really the benefit for special needs family, for special needs planning, is to help you and your loved ones and your family taken care of, so you can have something, in place. Right. So defining your intentions for your loved one, and after an event happens or after you're gone, I think this is pretty key. And there's variations of intentions, and one of them is called like a letter of intent, or it could be called a memorandum of intent. It's a letter, and it's not a legal document, but it's a letter. It's designed to give you kind of like a history of your special needs child. Everything from, his resources, maybe his caregivers, his habits, their habits, even if when he's for his schools and stuff, right? Everything that you can outline, and it's really designed to be in line with the special needs trust. So that gives the trustee kind of like guidance on how can they make sure that everything's in place for them if something happens. I think the letter of intent should align with the special needs trust. I think it's very important, and this is where everyone in the family gets involved. And then next is using your assets efficiently. This is where I really come in. I'm trying to preserve assets, make sure that they're there when they need them, as they go through their different changes in their life cycle. Probably the other important thing is too, when it comes to government benefits, I want to make sure that families, cover all their bases. We don't disrupt the benefits that they receive. And finally is, kind of like your estate, preserving your estate. And what I mean by that is something happens to, maybe the special needs child or another family member, at least you'll have a special needs trust in place, or at least a plan in place that you can help facilitate an efficient transfer of wealth. Now, things to consider when you're building a financial strategy, because this is really not just about just a special needs family itself. It's really your lifestyle. So when you're looking at your lifestyle, you're looking at everything. You're looking at your expenses, your cash flow in and out, your activities, how you want your own retirement, to be, how you want your own retirement for your family to look like, and making sure that you have adequate funds, benefits in place for every member of your family. So your lifestyle is pretty key. Next is estate planning services, and Lauren will touch on that. And this is really designed to really protect benefits that your special needs child may be receiving, from the government, and also protecting the assets that we have, your investable assets. And portfolio management, and all I'm doing with portfolio management is really working with the trustee and trying to preserve the assets, make it grow conservatively, but making sure that the trustee is aligned with the outlines of the wishes of the letter of intent, or even the special needs trust itself. And what I normally do when I'm working with a trustee, and the trustee happens to be the parent or a guardian or an outside fiduciary, I usually have them take what's called an investment profile test, because I'm trying to measure their risk tolerance, how they feel about money, that type of thing. So at least I know that we're going to be on the same page, and I can go ahead and create something that will meet what they're trying to, or what their objectives are. And preparing for unexpected. And I think probably Chase can maybe touch on this like towards the end. And this is really designed for, let's say that you need maybe like mortgage protection, right? And this is where insurance, comes a big part of the plan. Because with insurance, if you have insurance, you don't have to tap into your portfolio. You don't have to disrupt your benefits by having the insurance in place. And then lastly is liability management. And what I mean by liability management is it could be different assets that you have that maybe you can pay down debt and get rid of it, right, as you enter retirement. Other things that you can talk about is maybe if you do own a home, right, we can talk about that. Is that going to be a key asset later on in life, where you can possibly do a reverse mortgage, that type of thing, right? So liability management is key, is trying to keep your expenses down, and which ones you're going to use as an asset later to draw income out as you go through different life cycles for you and your family. Now I know that this can be kind of like overwhelming, as a parent, as a guardian, or a fiduciary, because there's so many different resources that you have to tap into and try to manage. And so it can be overwhelming, especially if you're, God, I see, families who are working full-time, and even now with working remote, children working from home, I know it can be a little bit overwhelming. So what I try to do as an advisor is pull all these resources together. So, me reaching out to Lauren when it comes to estate planning services, I can reach out to Chase when it comes to insurance services, that type of thing. So what I have is, I have every resource that I can manage, that I can, reach out to help me solve a problem or solution, for a family. I mean, I worked with care managers, and one of the organizations I work with, and I think maybe Tara or Sherry might know is SARC. It's San Andreas Resource Center. So I've been on these appointments where they have behavioralists come in, interview the child, just make sure that what their needs are and stuff. So these meetings they're interesting, and for an organization like SARC, I'm glad that we have that type of service, for their children. It's another resource for families. So for me, getting involved and seeing this firsthand, it allows me to bring additional resources when I meet new clients. And focus on the entire family. And what this means, for families is everyone should get involved, right? Because as the special needs child is growing, your other children or family members are growing as well. And what I've done in the past is what's called the TAC. It's TAC. It's like a trust advisory committee. And the trust advisory committee, you can incorporate that in your special needs trust. And what this allows to do is, like, let's say that maybe a parent or guardian no longer wants to, be the trustee. At least you can have a committee, maybe appoint a new one. So the committee gives you flexibility to kind of like hire and fire, the trustee. So I think it's, those are probably two key things that I think are important. One is creating kind of like a trust advisory committee, and also like a letter of intent or like a life plan. So at least you can outline your wishes on the future, on how you want the quality of life for your special child needs to be. And then lastly is government benefits. I do have resources for government benefits, and that's the whole point of having like a special needs trust, is you want to protect these, what you're already getting and receiving. And I think that's about it. So I'm going to hand this over to Lauren, and I'm just going to mute myself.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me? Yes? Okay, perfect. Just making sure. So thank you, George, so much for getting us started. And I want to thank Sherry and Tara for setting this opportunity up for us. I really appreciate it. This is something that I'm very passionate about. And so being able to talk to this community, I'm just very grateful for that opportunity. So thank you. And George, you can go to the next slide. And so I do also just need to give a quick disclaimer first. And so on my end, I wanted to just explain that during the Q&A, I'm not intending to be difficult by asking you to keep general questions. The attorney-client relationship, it can be created even if you're not intending to retain the services of that attorney. And so I just care about really upholding the ethical standards of my profession. And so I don't want anyone to accidentally waive any right to confidentiality by asking something very specific. So again, I'm absolutely grateful and would be glad to talk to you, if you want to send me an email or a phone call, no pressure, just if you have some follow-up questions that are too specific for today. And then George, you can go to the next slide. So my name is Lauren Edwards. I am a founding partner of Gomez Edwards Law Group, and we've been in practice. It'll be 5 years this January. My partner is Natalie Gomez, and we serve families really all over the state of California. We're both licensed in California, and we primarily provide services in the areas of family law and estate planning. And so real quick, my goal today, actually, if you can go back real fast, my goal today is also to provide just a general introduction to Special Needs Trust. I actually am probably going to talk a little bit longer. It'll probably be closer to 20 minutes because at the end I do want to touch on a couple of other things not specifically related to Special Needs Trust. But my main goal today is that each of you leave with an understanding of what to look for in your own life. That should be a trigger to talk to an attorney about if a special needs trust is appropriate in your family. Because I know this probably isn't going to be a surprise, but it's not necessarily appropriate for every family. So to get us started, I will talk about the who, which is Thank you. So the intended beneficiary of a special needs trust is someone who has a permanent or temporary disability. That is definitely a component of it. But the other critical component is if that person either needs to qualify for or is receiving specific government assistance benefits. And so you can go to the next slide because I start with the government benefits. So why are we creating a special needs trust? And again, the number one concern is preserving public benefits, but it is not every type of public benefit. There are government benefits that are based upon your work history, and then there are government benefits that are based upon what's known as a means test or a needs-based test. And so that requires the individual to have, who's receiving the benefits, to have under a certain income level and to have a minimal amount of assets. And right now that is $2,000. So we definitely are concerned with a beneficiary losing their right to those government benefits because of an influx of income. So coinciding with the preservation of the public benefits is we also want to preserve assets that the beneficiary can benefit from. So before special needs trusts were created, what families often did was they disinherited their child who was disabled and then would give the funds to a third party to manage for their child's benefit. Well, unfortunately, a lot of those people ended up being untrustworthy. They would mismanage the funds. They would use the funds for themselves. And so no one who's worked hard for assets to build up what they have should be in a position where they're forced to choose between their child continuing to receive their government benefits or receiving an inheritance from or support from family and loved ones. So by this process of preserving the public benefits and preserving the assets, families have an opportunity to increase the quality of life for their child or for their loved one. The public benefits that people receive are designated for very specific expenditures, basic necessities of daily life, such as food and housing. And so once you spend the money for that, there's nothing left over, generally speaking. And even if there were to be something left over, you cannot use those funds for a tutor or a special type of wheelchair. You cannot use those funds for other things that this person might need. So we are preserving the ability to enhance their life, enhance their quality of life. There's also the opportunity to enable families to engage in coordinated family giving. If families want to take, if they want to take advantage of being able to make that $15,000 gift to their child every single year, they can do that without risking the loss of the public benefits. And then the last question is going to be the age of the beneficiary, which is also going to be the first point on the next slide. And the age of the beneficiary is important because, as you may be well aware, minors cannot inherit funds. They can't inherit real property. They cannot inherit money. And so we have a couple of issues depending upon the age of the person inheriting if they're under 18. First of all, you may have someone who is 4, who's listed in a grandparent's estate. And so you have a child who's going to be inheriting funds. But at that age, you may not yet have an idea of what their future needs are going to be. And so you could potentially have a child inherit a large sum of money that if they are inheriting it, depending upon how they're inheriting it, it could disqualify them from the needed government benefits in the future. The other issue that we have is what is the source of the funds? And this comes into play in a couple of really important ways. So the ways that a trust can be funded are by the beneficiary themselves. And so this often comes into play if someone is directly receives an inheritance, not through a trust. Another very common source of funds is if there's a lawsuit. So if there's an accident and let's say that either the individual or the parents of the individual sue. Say that they have a slip and fall, and so you sue the grocery store, and there can be a money judgment that comes in, and so that is going directly to the beneficiary, and so they can use that inheritance Sometimes it's life insurance funds that are paid out directly to them, or they can use that money judgment to create their own trust. In that instance, it doesn't have to be, I kept saying that it's them who creates the trust. It can be someone who's doing it for their benefit, but the money is coming directly from them. So there's a couple of issues with this trust, which is this is not a trust that should be considered for purposes of passing on wealth, because any first party funded trust in California has a Medi-Cal payback requirement. So when the beneficiary of the trust passes, if there are any funds left over, the first person to receive those funds, or the first entity to receive those funds, is going to be Medi-Cal. So that's different from a third-party funded trust, which would be an example like grandma or grandpa or the parents wanting to make the trust for the benefit of their child. And that means that you're the source of the funds, you're creating the document, and this is a tool where you still can have the goal of passing on wealth. So there's no Medi-Cal payback provision requirement, and this is something that can be created in two ways. One, you can create it in your own estate plan that becomes effective when you pass, or you can create it as a standalone document, so that way you can start giving them funds as soon as it's executed that they can then benefit from without risking the loss of their government benefits. And so again, as the last bullet point says, the underlying goal of a special needs trust is to prevent that disqualification from those means tested government benefits. So we know the who and we know the why, and now we have an idea of the what. Actually, real fast before we go to the next slide, I do want to just give a brief explanation of how this works and how this document is effective. So if any of you have your own estate plans, if you have your own trust that you made for yourselves, you will be aware that even though you have this trust, you can do whatever you want with your money. If you want to go to the bank and withdraw all of it, it's completely fine. You still have every single right to your property, even though it's in a trust. With a special needs trust, you are essentially providing a wall between the funds and the intended beneficiary. So they don't have the right to go to the bank and withdraw everything. They don't even have the right to direct how the money is spent. It is completely at the discretion of the trustee to say, to coordinate with the beneficiary and say, what are your needs? What are you passionate about? Do you need a new wheelchair? Do you want to have switch care providers? And so talking in conjunction with the beneficiary, the trustee then has the discretion to make those expenditures on the beneficiary's behalf. The money never is given to the beneficiary. It's always paid directly to the service provider or directly to the vendor. So the money never technically belongs to the beneficiary. They just receive the benefit of it. Okay, so now we can go to the result. So we are able to increase the quality of life. And I recognize that a lot of these things we can't necessarily do right now because of COVID, but hopefully at some point things will revert back. And so buying tickets to concerts, to museums, if they have a favorite musician that they just light up when they see perform, that is a perfectly valid expenditure. Summer camps, extra tutors, if they have a hobby, that's a really big one. And also vacations. Vacations are completely appropriate to spend funds for. And really important to note, there's been some recent case law that says these special needs trust funds can be used to also pay for the expense of the care provider to travel. So that is a valid expense, which is wonderful. So again, the whole goal is about envisioning what do you want for your child's life and how can you help that become a reality through the utilization of a special needs trust and preserving their government benefits. So the next slide. So when you are looking at your own family and trying to decide if a special needs trust is appropriate, the very first thing to look at is their independence and what do you anticipate their needs in the future being, because everyone is going to be different. And you know your child best, you know their care providers, you know their doctor, and so being able to really determine, are they going to be able to work a full-time job? What is the likelihood? Is it going to be a full-time minimum wage job? Are they going to be able to have a higher paying job? And then based upon their independence, you'll be able to determine, are they likely going to need public benefits that are means tested? And if they are, would receiving funds disrupt their qualification for the public benefits? And so that does wrap up the Special Needs Trust. And so on the last slide, so some other legal considerations. So the first is the ABLE account, and this is, there was a law passed in 2014, which is the Achieving a Better Life Experience Act. And so important things to note is that one person can only have one account, and it has to be through a state designated program or institution. The disability qualifying for an ABLE account must begin before the age of 26. Other important things to note is that there is a cap on the amount of contributions that can be added to the account every year. It's $15,000. The account is, it's considered, it's a 529A account, so it's similar to educational accounts. In that the money does grow tax-free, but there are limits. So as opposed to a special needs trust where, let's say, you want to put in $15,000 a year to the special needs trust, grandma wants to put in $15,000 a year, that can grow a significant amount. You can also have a house in a special needs trust. You cannot do that with an ABLE account. It is only a financial account. And so there are some differences, but you can have both. You can have an ABLE account and a special needs trust. The other important thing to note with an ABLE account is that the accounts have not been around for very long. So legally, there's a lot of things about them that haven't been tested yet. And one of the issues that hasn't been tested is how large the account can grow to. So there is the 15,000 cap on an account, but right now there's some gray area as to whether or not the account is allowed to get bigger than 100,000 without it impacting those government benefits. So there are still unknowns, but it is still a valuable resource to look into. And so my next bullet point on here is talking about supported decision making. I will also talk about conservatorships. So for conservatorships, if you have, first of all, conservatorships are not going to be appropriate for every family. And until recently, that really was the only option that was available to families if they wanted to continue being really active participants in the care of their children. And so for some families, when it's appropriate, a conservatorship is a wonderful tool because it really gives parents that continuing authority to make all the decisions about where they live, their medication, any extras that they need to ensure a full life. But it's also very severe. And so you are really stripping this adult of all ability to make decisions for themselves. And yes, a conservator is supposed to consult the conservatee, and there is supposed to be, decisions shouldn't be made without their knowledge, but it is still very severe, and so it isn't appropriate for every family. So there's this new area that is up and coming, which is wonderful, which is called supported decision making. And so the goal of supported decision making is to really encourage the autonomy and independence of the disabled adult and making sure that they are centered in everything and that they know that they are the driving force in their life. But through tools such as powers of attorney and advanced healthcare directives, you are able to still nominate agents to act for you and act in coordination with you. And so it's a really wonderful area that's growing. And if you want more information about it, I absolutely know some people who are wonderful, who are advocates in this area, and I would be glad to connect you if that's something that you're interested in. If you are considering a conservatorship, because that is appropriate, if you have a teenager, it is definitely advisable to talk to an attorney about getting that process started around age 17. It's honestly, with what is happening with the courts right now, you could even start searching for an attorney at 16 and a half. I always, and I'll talk about this under the family law bullet point, but I really cannot stress enough to people how important the attorney-client relationship is and how you have to feel comfortable with the person that you're asking to advocate on your behalf. So definitely 17, don't go much past 17, but you could even start as early as 16 and a half just to make sure that you find the advocate that you are the most comfortable with and trust to take care of your family. So, and the comment about the courts is that right now, things have been really dramatically impacted by COVID. So if this is something that you're looking at in the next year, you absolutely need to get started on it because they are really spreading out hearings. They've had huge budget cuts, especially in Santa Clara, and so they've lost a significant number of staff. And this is true across, I only have the numbers for Santa Clara, but this is true across the state. And so in Santa Clara, we went from having multiple court reporters to now having, not court reporters, court investigators to now having 2. And so you have 2 people who are supposed to be doing these in-depth investigations for lots of families. And so there is going to be a big backlog. And so definitely getting started early is important. And then the last comment that I want to make is about family law, because that is a large component of our practice. As family law attorneys, we have worked with a number of families who were in the middle of a divorce who had a disabled child. And what I've learned in my experience is that judges do the best they can, but this is not something that they have the time to be educated on. And so a large part of our job has been taking the time to educate the judges about what the specific needs of the children are and how the court can take those needs into consideration when evaluating what's in their best interest. And so again, if you do find yourself in a situation where you've decided that a dissolution is the best thing for your family and you, when you're interviewing attorneys, please, I strongly recommend and encourage that you really take the time to ask attorneys if they've ever represented families with children with special needs, if they are open to receiving feedback from you about your specific child and what the needs of your child are, because in my experience, there are a lot of attorneys who are not open to receiving that feedback and who don't understand the intense time that is going to go into educating the judge about your specific family. And so with that, I will pass it on to Chase.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lauren and George. Those were some amazing presentations. That was a lot of awesome information that I personally didn't know a lot about, and I'm really glad to be able to pass that on to my current clients and really help qualify them with what you guys are talking about. There's a lot of good info in there, so I really appreciate that. One major aspect to planning with George and Lauren, though, is to make sure that you have a risk management plan in place. When you go through all these steps that George and Lauren are helping you guys get set up, you really want to make sure that you have all that protected. When you have an idea of exactly what those assets look like, it's very important, whether that be your auto insurance all the way to your life insurance, to make sure that you have a good risk management plan in place to protect all that for the future. Alrighty, but my main reason for being here today actually is to support an organization that's super near and dear to Texas Insurance, and that is TACT, Teaching the Autistic Community Traits. Right now, they're leading the charge on employment for the autistic community and in different fields of carpentry, auto shop, metal work, all different trait-related occupations. And it's pretty dang amazing what they're doing right now. It all was started by a family that had an autistic child who they found out as time went, they were slowly missing some of the progression marks, and they found that there was nothing really in place for their child to gain some skills for the future. And so what they did is they created this organization, and Currently, they're based out of Colorado, but they're in the process of expanding and setting up remote locations to continue serving a very underserved community. So one thing that we really wanted to offer with this webinar is I just really wanted to give you guys a gift. One thing that we've been doing is we work with TAC, where we did a donation to them, and we've been receiving these kits. These kits were actually created by one of the students of TAC. He's actually able to do all of these cuts and every aspect of this kit with no measuring, no nothing, and he builds these kits and all these individual pieces, and we actually have them together to send off to you and your family. So you guys can take a moment, build a little planter with you and your child. It requires little to no carpentry skills. It's a matter of a little bit of glue and wood, but it's a super fun little project, and it supports an organization that's doing a lot for this community. So if this is something that you're interested in, we would love to send this to you. And if you're not interested in receiving this, just toss in the chat real quick, like I'm okay on the gift. But if not, we would love to send it to you, give you a little bit more information on TAC. And once they start reaching this area out here, we'd definitely like to share some more info with you and hopefully get you guys involved with some of the traits. And thank you all for attending today. I really appreciate that. George and Lauren, you guys were absolute rock stars, and I'm sure there's some questions for you.
Yeah, thank you, Chase. Thanks, Lauren. That's a great presentation. On the next slide, I just wanted to leave our contact information. If you guys want to take a like a picture of it, that's fine too. It's just if you want to reach out to any of us regarding your situation. And I want to thank everyone for attending. On the next slide, if you want to take a shot of this, and I'll toggle back and forth. These are some of the resources that I've been involved with and where I've done my research. Probably the one that I've been to a lot is SARC, because I've been able to attend with families when I go on these meetings with them. Yeah, so SARC I go to a lot, and I also go to Special Needs Alliance and also the ARC. Those are really great resources, and I would, if you haven't, and you probably already have already, but I wanted to share that information with you. Now, with that said, I thought Lauren's information, great information, and Chase, I thank you so much for providing the gifts to our participants. And I think now we just kind of like open it up, Tara, for anyone who has any additional questions.
Absolutely. And just a reminder as well that everybody that signed up through the Eventbrite, we have your email address, and so we will send out the slide presentation, which has these last 2 slides, as well as a link to the recording. But yes, if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask and just unmute yourself, and we have some time.
Hello, Steve Volk here for Lauren. Do you hear me?
I do.
Cool, it's working. Great. Hey, so I just want to be clear. The Special Needs Trust, that's different from just a regular trust, or do they kind of build on each other?
So they are very different. A regular trust, the main focus is going to be that you want to avoid probate. In California, that's a really big thing. You're trying to avoid probate, you're trying to preserve wealth, and you're trying to be prepared for your own incapacity and death. A special needs trust can be created in your estate plan. And so the special needs trust does not exist until it's activated by you passing. Or you can have a standalone special needs trust, but the big difference is the stated goals. So in your estate plan for yourself, you're avoiding probate, you're passing on your assets to your beneficiaries, avoiding as much taxes as possible. But a special needs trust is specifically about enhancing the quality of life for a disabled person while preserving their access to those government benefits. So the goals are very different.
Could you include the special needs child in the regular trust?
Absolutely, yes. So absolutely, we do that all the time. And so yes, so what you do in your trust, and when you talk to an attorney, what they'll do is they will include this person as a beneficiary, and then they will say that they're inheriting it by the terms of the special needs trust later on in the document. And absolutely, you can provide a special needs trust through your own estate plan. Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. But the thing that hit me on yours was you're right about losing the benefit, the government benefit.
Yes.
But that's the first time I actually really heard that about the trust. So that's a great point.
Yes, and so again, you know, there are lots of people who have a disability who don't qualify for those government benefits, and so in those situations, a special needs trust would not be appropriate because you'd be limiting their funds and their access to their funds for really no reason. The benefits to look out for is supplemental income, SSI, and something like Medicaid or Medi-Cal, where you have to qualify. So if the intended beneficiary doesn't use those benefits, doesn't need those benefits, then you don't need a special needs trust.
Yeah, okay.
Do you have any lawyers you can represent in the state of Nevada?
I am actually on a mission to find some for you. I am working on it, and I will definitely let Sherry and Tara know as soon as I have some names, so that way they can provide those to you. I am on a mission. I will
Awesome.
find one.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Questions? Pretty silent group. We must have covered it all. Okay.
Yes,
Well-
hi, I have a question.
Go ahead.
What is the typical cost of setting up a special needs trust?
So it really depends. I know you're not going to like this answer. It depends upon the, what state are you in? Where are you calling from?
California.
California. Okay. So California just recently, unfortunately, changed the law. So we're not really supposed to offer flat fee services anymore. So attorneys are now supposed to be charging hourly for them. And so it really just varies upon how the hourly rate of the attorney. So my hourly rate for estate planning services is $300, but I'm also inclined to give credits at the end of the service. And I don't, so it really depends upon what other attorneys charge. The special needs trust is rather time intensive to create. They usually take a few hours, and then there's a process of reviewing it. So I know that's not the perfect answer, but it depends upon the hourly rate and the length of time it takes.
Thank you.
Okay. I think that's it. So again, I want to thank you all. Thank you, George, Lauren, and Chase for all the great information, and Chase for the little bonus gift. I think that's it. So please feel free to reach out to any of these three as they've given you the contact information. Reach out to myself or Sherry. And we didn't introduce Greg, and I think he already took off. I don't know if he's still on here. Yeah. Oh, no, he's still there. Greg is the principal in our San Jose. He's the director of education programs, principal of both locations in California. And so he has been on as well, just to make sure that if our families were here, they know they could reach out to him as well for follow-up questions, basic things. But yeah, I want to thank you all so much for being here today. This was great. This was the first of, we hope, many. Maybe we'll offer this again in the future, a different time. But I want to thank you all and have a great day.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you so much for putting this together.
Thanks, Sherry.
Yes, thank you.